There, my name is Heather Feather. I am the owner of Rare Bird Medicine, and today's topic is NeuroSpicy. A little flavor in that brain. I give credit to Kaylin, my friend who is also NeuroSpicy, that is the first person I heard use that term, and I think it's hilarious. Did you know, and you may know, and you may be like, I didn't know that, but that checks, that Albert Einstein, Nikola Tesla, Elon Musk, Sir Isaac Newton were all neurodivergent, which can also be framed as autistic. You might go, yeah, that checks. But did you know also that Dan Aykroyd, Daryl Hannah, Courtney Love, Jerry Seinfeld are also all autistic or neurodivergent? I think that neurospiciness does not, it's important to know being neurodivergent means that several different dials of the way your brain works are different from what would be considered neurotypical for a brain to work. And so we're talking about several different dials of being. And so one dial is special interest. Heather has lots of special interest. I love art. I love all forms of art. I love architecture. I love the way things are built. I'm very interested in like classic things. And I love to produce I want to do dioramas. I want to do paintings. I've considered needle felting. I've made jewelry. I love to craft and I love to produce art. And in the coming year, I hope to produce more art for 2025. But that's not my only special interest. And this is common for female individuals with neurodivergence or autism. It's not definitively just them, but they have a tendency to have such a wide array of interests instead of just like a few specific interests that they're very hyper-focused in. And that's part of how they're like culturally brought up. You're supposed to be into makeup and fashion and da-da-da-da-da. And so a lot of women are able to kind of mask because it's like, yes, I have all these interests. I don't love makeup and fashion, but I do love talking about death and sexuality and psychology and metaphysics and spirituality, and all that interests me deeply. Typically, irrespective of your genitalia, as a neurodivergent person or as an autistic person, you do not enjoy talking about things that don't interest you. And so literally when people talk to me about, let's say, politics, my brain just shuts. I just go, bored. I'm just so bored. I'm so bored with this topic. It's the same if you talk to me about celebrities or handbags or I don't like labels. I don't like bored. Like those topics don't interest me. Not because I'm superior, not because I'm better than anybody else. They're just things that did not garner my attention. Because I have all these, so the dial of special interest, because I have all these special interests, they are able to garner so much of my attention. I was talking to my sister recently, actually today, and I was talking to my niece who was here last week. And I was telling both of them, and I often tell them this, like, I'm sorry, I don't call you. I don't call my people. If you know me, you know that I don't call you. You know that I don't call you. You might be able to count on one hand the number of times I've called you, and if you can, that's a miracle. Heather was having a wild hair day. I don't call people because I have a million things to study and focus on that interest me, and I don't need to have a check-in. Like, you're not my therapist, I'm not your therapist. I don't need to check in with you. I trust that your soul is learning exactly what it wanted to learn. My soul has a lot that it wants to learn, and I like to focus on it. So there's a component with neurodivergence and autism, another dial called I'm not relating to others in a neurotypical way. This is common for me in a cafe. I usually on the weekends work in a cafe. I do data entry from home on the weekdays. And every weekend I go to work for Rare Bird Medicine in a cafe. And I can't tell you how many times in my life I've looked people in the face that I know, and my brain does not think to say hello or to smile because my brain is mired in special interests. And so I'm really working on that. I've been working in the past year to be like, smile like a regular person or say hello. Be less weird, maybe for 1 second. Good luck with that. But have you ever received people that know you and they don't say hi and you get offended? Is it possible that they're neurodivergent? Is it possible that they have autism? Is it possible that their brain is a little different in the way it processes social interaction? There are a lot of things I do that are not socially normative. I mutter to myself a lot. I talk to myself because most of my life revolves around my brain processing thoughts and what it wants to create. And I have moments where I'm like, oh, I've been muttering to myself for like an hour in this cafe. Let me really try to be quiet. It's difficult because my mouth muttering in my ears feels like a whiteboard outside of what's going on inside my brain, and it helps me to clarify thought. But that's an example of how my brain thinks a little different. There's a Maori tribe of people, and they describe autism as people being outside of space and time, or people being in a different space-time. And I really relate to that interpretation because I feel like I am constantly in a different space-time to the majority of humanity. I feel like humans are often either going way too slow, they're being real dramatic about that right or left turn. Like, did you not get enough attention as a child? Can you just turn right? What are we doing? Or they're being like way too fast. I had a guy nearly kill me and a semi-driver today as he whipped in and he was speeding like, bless it, may you arrive home safe, because I certainly know many that have died on the road. May you get there safely while you're being cray-cray and unsafe. But to me, there is a flow. There is an energetic flow of space-time. And when you get in the flow, life gets really easy. When Heather goes too fast because she has such a great sense of urgency that she's running out of time to do all the things she wants to create and become and be, I'm out of the flow. And I don't like to be out of the flow. There is, to me, a rhythm in space-time that you can tap into in which you align for the perfect parking spot. Things line up for you. You're able to get in the cashier line when it's not busy. And however much stop-start you have going on in your life is indicative of how out of the space-time flow you're being. That's a goofy thought. Like most two-leggeds that I know are not. I spend a tremendous amount of consciousness thinking about people, myself included, being out of the flow, in the flow. And that's weird. It's weird for some people. There is a dial in neurodivergence called sensory overload, and also a dial called stimming. So sensory overload is where you take in too much and you need to shut down. I love a sensory deprivation tank. Feel like I could be in one until I die. Freaking love it. Love to have no light, no sound, floating. Not for everybody, but to me that's medicinal. That's a medicine for me, is to not receive as much. Because I've been receiving and studying and pulling data out of the universe for my special interests since I was knee-high to a grasshopper. And so it's nice to kind of shut it down. What can happen when you go out in the world and outside of your safe space, which for many neurodivergent people, their home is their safe space. And when they're outside of their home, they're not in their safe space, not meaning that they're going to have a crime happen, even though neurodivergent people are 3 times more likely to be sexually assaulted. But because it doesn't feel safe, because I don't know how to appropriately interact and react with you. And there's lots of things that are happening that are out of the flow, and I'm getting sensory overload. There's lots of lights and sounds, and I can't get away from it, to just kind of be in my little nest and in my little cave. And so that can cause somebody to have meltdown when they're out in the world. So Heather has practices of regulating my system or closing my eyes. I will close my eyes so fast in a public space. I'll be working and I will close my eyes and continue typing just to shut out all the light for a minute, In that same vein, stimming is where you have I often am rubbing my fingers like this. I was talking to my sister earlier today, walking up and down, and I'm just rubbing my fingers. And it's just because I'm receiving information and I'm receiving visual stimulation as I look around the city outside of this cafe, receiving this phone call. And so there's a need for me to move energy because I'm having visual stimulation, auditory stimulation, and I just need to move the energy. And so a lot of autistic and neurodivergent people are told to don't do that. Don't move your hands. Don't, and it's like telling a child that they can't self-soothe. If your child's rocking back and forth, that actually can support the nervous system, and that rocking back and forth can be a form of self-soothing. It's also something that autistic people do. My dear friend, who is an amazing biologist, he's written, a 900-page book on crickets. He and I have lived together many, many times. He's a dear friend of mine, but he would constantly put on punk music, put on No Means No, and just rock back and forth, regulate his system. So there may be ways as a neurodivergent or an autistic person that your life requires a lot more self-regulation because you're out of the space-time of the paradigm that you're in, like the Maori people say, and you're trying to find a rhythm that causes you to feel in balance. In my experience, autistic or neurodivergent people are very emotionally intelligent, very psychic. Every single one that I've ever met is actually quite attuned And I can appreciate, like, I have a friend that is more nonverbal. He's a sweetheart, and he's one of my closest friends, brothers. And I did not know, because he's much farther on the spectrum, even though I'm very far on the spectrum than I. When I met him, I went to hug him, and he doesn't like hugs. And a lot of neurodivergent people don't like hugs because, like, I don't like light, feathery touches. I don't want you to, like, it makes you want to geek out, even if I pretend to do it with myself. I want to be aggressively held. I like compression. I'm not saying, like, break my bones, but, like, I like to know that touch is present. I'm not trying to be tickled. I don't like being tickled. And this piece that I'm fleshing up is a component of neurodivergence. There may be lots of things that you do not like. I don't like the way velvet feels is something I've heard from a neurodivergent person. Or, like, I don't like the sound of, sometimes I like the sound of somebody crunching chips with their mouth open. It's like, whoo, okay, we're going to put in some headphones while this is happening. You know what I mean? At the same time, I could probably eat chips with my mouth open and be unaware at some points in this life, because I can be so insular in my own mind. And so I often have to check in, like, how are you being in the world right now, Heather? I do all kinds of things. I'll stretch my hip out by, like, crossing my leg and then squatting down while I stand in line. And I'll, like, stretch my hip out by doing this kind of converted tree pose. It's more of a seated posture, kind of like chair and tree mixed together. But I do lots of weird things publicly that are not, like, you're not supposed to do that. That's socially weird. But I don't want a tight hip at 89 years old. And whatever opinions you're having of me in this shopping line is your problem. You're the one that's in judgment. Like, it's not my problem. You're having a problem. You know what I mean? I find that people that are neurodivergent typically love the truth. They are typically very emotionally intelligent. They are typically easily overwhelmed. They have to find ways to regulate their system. They have to find ways to balance their system. They can be overly direct when they're experiencing something they don't like. I don't like this. I don't like this topic. I've done that with people where it's like, your topic is full of, like, depressing, sad, complaining stories. Like, I've only heard you complain for 3 hours. And I find that unpleasant. What are you grateful for? You know what I mean? That can be considered very rude. It also can at the same time be very true. And I don't like for you to just shovel trash into my basket that I endlessly have to listen to, and you have no responsibility for ever changing the frequency or vibration of a conversation. You have no duty in your sovereignty to be attentive. Now, that doesn't mean you can't complain to me. Doesn't mean you can't tell me problems. That's like, that happens. Heather's had a heck of a day yesterday. It was an amazing day, but I have, like, nonstop challenges. And so you can tell me your challenges, but there are plenty of two-leggeds that are just spilling poison in everyone's cup. Just like, anyhow, this terrible thing happened, and then this terrible thing's happening in the world, and then this terrible, and your mind is a creative garden. And I'm not trying to bloom rotting fruit. What are we doing? It's very ineffectual. So sometimes the directness of the love of truth that can come out of a neurodivergent person is not socially appropriate. Like, I don't feel like I need to be polite and cater to the impolite way you are communicating with me. It's not considerate of my feelings, I'd rather be more direct. This feels unpleasant to talk in this way, And so, although I do work to be mindful of, like, saying hello to people when I look upon them, coming out of my internal world more, being able to, spending my life really never wanting to correct others, because there are lots of things that do or do not work for me, but that's okay. You don't have to be like me. This role is taken. I say that all the time. You are free to be you. I don't need you to change for me, boo. I do find that I don't expect much from others. I'm not expecting anything from anyone. I don't expect you to like me, to enjoy me, to be my friend, to call me. I notice a lot of expectation in more neurotypical people. They didn't call, they didn't, and it's like, okay. Are they living their life to please you? I don't know what's happening right now. So I just wanted to make this video to point to some of the people in your life may be far more NeuroSpicy than you think, and that may not be what you conceive in your mind. You can always subscribe to Rare Bird Medicine on YouTube. I have many services at rarebirdmedicine.com, and I'd love to serve you. Amuna Sena Star.